Imagine spending 30 years building your dream lakefront villa, only to have your daughter handed over to her husband's parents and tell you you're no longer welcome in your own home. That's what happened to me. They arrived with smiles, luggage, and entitlement. She said it was their house now, told me I needed to leave, so I did, but not in surrender, in silence, because while they were celebrating their stolen victory, I was already planning what they'd walk into the moment they crossed that threshold. No confrontation, no police, no yelling, just a perfect, legal, psychological reversal. A weekend in my villa they'd never forget. Lights, voices, shadows, and a message they couldn't ignore. This house still knows who it belongs to. If you believe justice doesn't always come from a courtroom, like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you think I went too far, or not far enough, I pulled into the gravel drive of Crescent House just past 4 in the afternoon. The late spring sun filtered through pine branches overhead, scattering golden flecks across the windshield of my black coupe. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, the kind of full, quiet inhale you forget is possible when life piles too much on your back. Crescent Lake glimmered just beyond the tree line, calm and glassy as ever. This house, this property, had been my retreat since long before my wife Sarah passed. It wasn't just real estate. It was memory preserved in cedar, stone, and sunlight. I'd made the drive from Grey Ridge at least once a month since her funeral. Not for business, not for anyone else, just for me. A few days by the lake to remember the years that had mattered, and to forget the ones since. This weekend was supposed to be no different. Or so I thought. The moment I stepped out of the car, I knew something was off. It wasn't the silence. That was normal out here. It was the stillness. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel empty, but occupied. Watched. I grabbed my overnight bag from the trunk and started toward the house. That's when I saw them. 2 figures on the terrace. Bathrobes, coffee mugs, laughing, at ease. Rachel leaned against the railing, her dark hair pulled back, eyes shaded behind oversized sunglasses. Beside her stood Evan, her husband of 3 years. He spotted me first, and the shift in his posture was immediate. Coffee lowered, eyes widened, shoulders stiffened. Rachel turned casually, but the moment she recognized me, her smile evaporated like fog off the lake. "Dad?" she called. Her voice cut through the quiet like a thrown knife. "What are you doing here?" I stopped halfway up the stone path, blinking. "What do you mean? What am I doing here?" "This is my house." Rachel didn't flinch. "Evan and I are spending the weekend. We're already settled in, so maybe you could come back another time?" My bag slipped from my hand. The weight didn't change, but something inside me cracked. "Excuse me?" She crossed her arms. "We're here first. We planned this. You didn't ask," I said, my voice tight. "You didn't even mention. I didn't think I had to," she snapped. "It's a family property, isn't it?" "No," I said flatly. "It's my property. The title's in my name," she shrugged. "Well, it's not just yours anymore." That sentence hit harder than it should have. I stared at her, trying to find some trace of the girl I used to tuck in at night. The one who cried for days when Sarah died. The one I'd given everything to, hoping that love might hold our broken family together. But that girl wasn't standing there anymore. Evan stayed silent, eyes darting everywhere but toward me. "I drove 2 hours for this," I said quietly. "And I'm telling you," Rachel replied, her voice suddenly steel, "you're not staying here this weekend." I wanted to argue, wanted to shout, but my body, or maybe something deeper, had already started retreating. My knees ached as I bent to retrieve my bag. My pride ached more. "Fine," I muttered. Rachel didn't respond. She just turned back toward the lake, coffee raised like a toast to my exit. I got back in the car, backed out slowly, and started down the long road back to Grey Ridge. The lake disappeared behind me in the rearview mirror, replaced by pine trees that blurred together with the rage building in my chest. My phone buzzed twice during the drive. I didn't check it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had dipped low behind the hills, leaving my house in long, bruised shadows. I made coffee, microwaved some leftovers, and sat in my study, staring at nothing. And then the phone rang again. It was Rachel, I answered, hoping for regret. For decency. For my daughter, instead, I got this. "Dad, listen carefully. Crescent House is no longer yours. Evan's parents needed more. It's theirs now. You're not allowed to go back. I laughed. A short, stunned exhale. What are you talking about? They need a place. You barely use it. They're moving in this weekend. My hands curled into fists, but my voice stayed low. You don't have the right. I do, she said coldly. And if you try to interfere, you'll regret it. Click, the line went dead. The room did too. I sat in silence for nearly an hour. The last of the daylight slid off my windows, and still I didn't move. My daughter had just told me, clearly, without hesitation, that my home was no longer mine. I stood, walked to the shelf where Sarah's photo still sat, and stared at her smiling face. I whispered, it's time to stop being patient. By Monday morning, my mind was no longer fogged by shock. The ache in my chest had cooled into something far more useful: precision. Years in construction taught me that problems only overwhelm you when you fail to measure them. So I measured. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began dissecting the situation like I would a structural blueprint. The facts were clear. The title to Crescent House was still in my name. No transfers, no legal filings, no paperwork of any kind. Whatever Rachel thought she had done was purely verbal, assumed, or delusional. But that didn't mean it wasn't dangerous. People who feel entitled to what isn't theirs will take what they want, unless stopped. I called Victor Lynn, the attorney who'd helped me through zoning wars, property disputes, and a decade of city council politics. When I explained the situation, he didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, there was a pause. Do they have any written claim? He asked. No, I said, not yet. Then we get ahead of them. By the end of that meeting, I had a checklist: reconfirm ownership, initiate property protections, and begin documentation of all contact. Victor called it pre-litigation shielding. I called it tightening the perimeter. That night, Rachel texted again. Dad, stop being difficult. You barely go to the lake anymore. Glenn and Marianne have nowhere to go. They're family now. That word again. Family, like it excused theft, like it erased boundaries. I didn't reply. Tuesday morning, I called Noah, my neighbor 2 doors down, who once turned his garage into a fully automated greenhouse just for fun. Last winter, I helped him fix a foundation crack after the storm. He owed me. More importantly, he liked challenges. I didn't tell him who was coming. I just told him I wanted Crescent House to respond to motion, lights, and voices, but not in the usual way. Noah grinned. You want it to scare people? Not scare, educate, he nodded. You want a lesson built into the floorboards? Exactly. By noon, we had a plan. By evening, we had gear, motion sensors, smart lighting, speakers, cameras, a remote control tablet, and a backup power grid that couldn't be shut off by flipping a breaker. Noah called it a ghost grid. I called it a net. Wednesday and Thursday, we worked in silence, turning Crescent House into something no one could take without feeling watched. Every light was wired. Every hallway could speak. Every faucet, every stereo, every power outlet, all waiting for a signal. Want to add projections? Noah asked. Shadows on the walls? Yes, I said, but nothing too obvious, just enough to make them doubt what they're seeing. He grinned. That's the best kind. By Friday evening, the house looked untouched from the outside, serene, inviting, but inside it waited, like a held breath. Saturday passed in silence. Then Sunday came. At 2:42 p.m., a blue SUV pulled into the gravel drive. I watched from my study in Grey Ridge, the tablet balanced on my knee. The security cameras lit up one by one. First the driveway, then the walkway, then the porch. Rachel stepped out first, sunglasses on, smile wide. Evan followed, carrying 2 suitcases. Behind them came Glenn and Marianne, older, slower, dressed like they were arriving for a resort vacation instead of trespassing on someone else's life. I watched them approach the front door. Marianne paused to read the professionally mounted sign Noah had insisted on. Welcome to Crescent House, a fully automated smart home. Enter at your own risk, she laughed. What is this, a joke? Rachel waved her off. Just my dad being dramatic. Glenn bent down and yanked the sign out of the bracket. It clattered to the porch floor. Fix that? He said. They used a copied key to open the front door. The motion sensors blinked red. The system armed itself. And the house, my house, prepared to deliver the first lesson. I waited. Crescent House didn't react right away. That was by design. The system was built not to startle at the first step, but to observe, to record, to let the intruders get comfortable. That was the key to making them feel like they belonged, so the reversal would feel like the ground shifting beneath their feet. The cameras gave me a clear view as they carried their luggage through the front hall. Marianne paused to admire the living room's lake view. Glenn moved toward the kitchen. Evan followed behind, nodding toward the upstairs loft like he'd already laid claim. Rachel looked right at the main hallway camera without flinching. She knew it was there. She just didn't believe it mattered. I waited until they were fully inside, the front door closed, the locks automatically engaged by the system. Only then did I tap the command on the tablet. Lights in the entryway dimmed, subtle, just a few degrees, enough to shift the tone. The voice assistant, disguised to sound neutral, synthetic, genderless, spoke in even cadence. "Welcome to Crescent House. Unauthorized access detected. This property is under active surveillance." Marianne blinked. "Did you hear that?" Evan glanced toward the ceiling. "That's just the smart system. It always does that when the power cycles." But the power hadn't cycled. The voice was live. "Real time." Rachel looked annoyed. "Ignore it." They moved deeper into the house. As soon as they passed through the central hallway, motion sensors triggered the lighting sequence. It didn't flash. It pulsed, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat. Each room they entered grew a little colder, not actually, but psychologically. The lights dimmed behind them, brightened ahead, always one step out of sync with their movement. Glenn opened the fridge and frowned. "This isn't stocked," Rachel shrugged. "We'll order in." In the upstairs hallway, the first sound effect activated. Soft creaking, like footsteps on old wood. Even though Crescent House had silent floors, Marianne turned around, eyes narrowed. "Did someone just come in?" "No," Rachel snapped. "There's no one here but us." That was partially true. There was no one they could see. The system waited until evening. Noah had programmed the audio grid to align with natural human fatigue patterns. As night fell and adrenaline lowered, the system grew bolder. In the living room, the stereo turned on by itself. Just static, low volume, almost beneath hearing. When Glenn reached to turn it off, it raised by 3 decibels, then shut off on its own. In the kitchen, the faucet began dripping, not rhythmically, intermittently, maddeningly. Upstairs, every third step on the staircase emitted a soft groan, even though the wood was reinforced. In the guest bedroom, one of the smart bulbs dimmed itself repeatedly every time Marianne turned it up. Evan tried to access the control panel Noah had hidden behind a locked panel. His confusion deepened when the system responded with a calm message. "Control access denied." "You are not recognized." Rachel stared at her phone. "There's no Wi-Fi." "There's supposed to be," Evan said. I used it last time we were here." "There's no signal now," Rachel said. She was wrong. The signal was fine. The router simply blocked all unknown MAC addresses. At precisely 10 p.m., the voice system activated again. "This property belongs to Mark Caldwell. Unauthorized occupants must vacate immediately." That got their attention. Marianne gasped. "What did it say?" Evan looked up. "It must be a prank." "It's his prank," Rachel said darkly. "He's trying to scare us." She wasn't wrong. But fear was just a symptom. The real purpose was dislodging entitlement. The lights flickered twice. Then came the shadows. In the hallway, a motion-triggered projector cast a tall silhouette on the far wall, vague, humanoid, distorted. Just for a second, then gone. But not forgotten. Evan saw it. Froze. Looked again. Nothing. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "No," Rachel said. "And even if I did, I don't care." At 11:17 p.m., the sound grid layered in environmental cues. Wind whistling, doors creaking that never opened, footsteps in adjacent rooms. The soundscape was randomized. No pattern, no logic, just confusion. Marianne refused to sleep in the guest room. "Something's wrong with the walls," she said. "What does that mean?" Rachel snapped. "They're too quiet." "Then they're not." Glenn tried to reset the main breaker, found it locked. The battery grid kept power running. All indicators showed green. No malfunctions, just obedience. To me. At midnight, every faucet in the house turned on. Kitchen sink, upstairs showers, guest bathroom. Not enough to cause damage, just noise. Chaos. Evan ran to turn them off. The moment he left the room, they turned back on. "No," he muttered. "No way," the voice returned. "Leave now. Final warning. This property is protected, Rachel screamed. Turn it off. Turn everything off, Evan shouted. I can't! There's no access. There's no control. That's when the front door refused to open. For 30 seconds, the smart locks engaged, as programmed, not permanent, just long enough to make the walls feel closer. Marianne broke down crying. Glenn shouted into empty rooms. Rachel pounded on the control panel. Evan stood in the center of the living room, arms at his sides, lips moving, but saying nothing. The system eased back at 12:45 a.m. Lights returned to normal. Water stopped. Shadows vanished. But the damage was done. I watched them sit together in the living room, not speaking, not moving, too stunned to sleep, too afraid to separate. In their silence I found peace, no threats, no confrontation, no violence, just clarity. You don't belong here. And now they understood. By 2 in the morning, Crescent House was in full command. I sat in my Grey Ridge study, monitors glowing across my desk, each screen divided into quadrants showing every room. Rachel and Evan huddled together on the sofa, their bodies stiff, their words clipped. Glenn sat in a recliner, head in his hands, while Marianne muttered to herself in the corner. Their bravado from the afternoon had drained away, like the water running from the faucets they could not stop. Noah's ghost grid was a masterpiece of patience. Nothing attacked them outright. Nothing screamed. Nothing lunged from shadows. The house simply made it impossible to rest, impossible to feel safe, impossible to believe they were welcome. At 2:13 a.m., the projector system re-engaged. A shadow appeared at the top of the staircase, tall, elongated, its proportions just slightly wrong. Evan jumped to his feet. Who's there? His voice cracked high and thin. The shadow didn't move. When he took a step toward it, the shadow dissolved into nothing. Marianne gasped like she'd seen the devil himself. The voice assistant waited 30 seconds, then delivered another message, calm and steady. Warning. You are trespassing. This house does not belong to you. Vacate immediately. Marianne clutched Glenn's arm. It knows we're here. Glenn tried to sound authoritative, but his voice betrayed the tremor in his chest. It's just programming. He set it up remotely. Rachel shot a glare at the ceiling camera. Dad, I know you can hear me. This is pathetic. You can't scare us out of this house. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Defiance was expected, but her eyes flickered sideways as she said it, searching for confirmation from Evan. And Evan wasn't offering any. At 3:05, the soundscape shifted again. This time it was whispers, indistinct, layered, designed to tickle the edge of hearing. A woman's voice repeating words they couldn't quite make out. Evan spun in a circle, his jaw tight, fists clenching and unclenching. Do you hear that? Marianne whispered. Stop talking, Rachel snapped. You're making it worse, but the whispers grew louder until they were unmistakable. Get out! Get out! Get out! The living room lights strobed once. Just once. Enough to raise every heartbeat in that house. Evan marched to the breaker box again, yanked it open, and stared at the array of industrial batteries neatly sealed behind the false panel Noah had built. His face drained. This isn't a normal system, he muttered. It's fortified. Glenn shoved him aside. So bypass it. I can't, Evan said, his voice cracking. This isn't something you just bypass. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. Rachel pressed her hands against her temples. He's doing this to humiliate us. He thinks this makes him strong. Her words didn't matter. Her voice shook. Her defiance was no longer conviction. It was desperation wrapped in anger. By 4:00 a.m., the house fell silent again. That was part of the design, too. Silence can be more suffocating than noise when you're waiting for the next attack. They sat in that silence for nearly an hour, too drained to speak, too wired to close their eyes. At 5:17, the final sequence began. The projectors activated in every main room simultaneously. Shadows moved along the walls, tall and thin, pacing back and forth like restless guards. The sound system layered in heavy footsteps overhead, then at ground level, then directly behind them. Rachel jumped to her feet, her voice breaking. Stop it! Just stop it! The voice assistant responded immediately. This is not your home. Leave now. Final warning. The faucets turned on again. Every shower erupted at once. The kitchen sink blasted water onto the counters. The washing machine churned, though it was empty. The sensory assault was total. Glenn staggered toward the front door, yanking at the handle. The lock held fast. He pounded his fist against the wood. "Let us out!" 30 seconds later, the smart lock released. The door swung open. Cold dawn light spilled into the room. They didn't hesitate. Suitcases were abandoned. Coffee mugs left on the counter. Marianne fled first, Glenn close behind. Evan and Rachel followed, both wild-eyed and disheveled, dragging what little they could carry. I watched them sprint down the path toward the blue SUV. Rachel's voice carried faintly through the outdoor microphone. "This isn't over. He thinks he's won, but it isn't over," but her voice cracked on the last word. The SUV roared to life and sped down the gravel road, leaving Crescent House in silence once again. The house stood calm, untouched, as though nothing had happened at all. At 7:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. Her name flashed across the screen. I answered with steady calm. "Good morning, Rachel." Her reply was shrill, hysterical. "What did you do to us? That house went insane. The lights, the voices, the shadows. Mom would be ashamed of you." I let her rant until her voice broke into sobs. Then I spoke, measured and cool. "Rachel, I was here in Grey Ridge all night. How could I possibly control something 200 miles away?" She choked back tears. "You did this. Somehow you did this. Or maybe," I said softly, "Crescent House just doesn't like strangers." Silence. 10 long seconds. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled. The lesson was delivered. The house had spoken, but I knew Rachel. One night of terror wouldn't be enough. She would come back. She would escalate. And when she did, I would be ready. Tuesday morning, the monitors in my study flickered to life as Crescent House streamed its feeds back to me. The lake shimmered calm in the background. Pine trees swayed with spring wind, and for the first time in years the house looked truly at peace. But peace never lasts long when greed still lingers. At 10:07 a.m., a new vehicle rolled into the driveway. Not the blue SUV this time. A white van with lettering I recognized immediately. Ridgefield Locksmith Services. Evan stepped out of the passenger side, tense but purposeful. He'd shaved, dressed sharply, and walked with that stiff arrogance of a man who believed tools could solve problems his courage couldn't. The locksmith followed him up the path. A wiry man in his 50s carrying a heavy kit. Evan gestured toward the front door, explaining something with rapid hand movements. "The cameras picked up every word. Systems malfunctioning," he said. "We just need the lock swapped. Basic job." The locksmith studied the smart keypad and biometric panel Noah had installed. His eyebrows furrowed. "This isn't basic, sir. This is integrated." "Just do it," Evan snapped. The locksmith knelt down, tested the panel with his instruments, then leaned back with a sigh. "Sir, this isn't something I can change without reprogramming the whole system. Whoever designed this built redundancies, backup power, remote overrides. It's impressive." Evan's jaw tightened. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you need a home automation specialist, not a locksmith." The man snapped his kit shut. "This is way beyond me." Frustration boiled out of Evan in a half-shouted curse. The locksmith walked back to his van without another word, clearly eager to leave. Within minutes, the vehicle disappeared down the road. Evan stood on the porch, staring at the locked door as if it were mocking him. Then he kicked it, hard. Once, twice. But the reinforced frame didn't budge. He muttered something under his breath and stormed back to his SUV. By evening, I knew Rachel would hear about his failure. She wouldn't take it quietly. At 8 sharp, headlights cut across my driveway in Grey Ridge. A car door slammed. Then another. Moments later, pounding rattled my front door. I didn't flinch. I opened it slowly, deliberately. Rachel and Evan stood there, both visibly frayed. Her eyes were wild, her face flushed, her lips drawn tight as though holding back words too sharp to unleash on the porch. Evan stood behind her, fists clenched, jaw hard. "Dad!" Rachel said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. "We need to talk, do we?" I asked, my tone flat. She pushed past me without waiting for permission. Evan followed. They stopped in the center of my entryway as though they owned that space too. "You need to stop this," she said, her voice climbing. "Whatever you've done to Crescent House, undo it. Right now." I crossed my arms. "Undo what?" "You know exactly what," Evan barked. "The lights. The shadows. The voices. That wasn't some malfunction. You rigged it." "Interesting accusation," I replied calmly. "Do you have proof?" Evan faltered, his mouth opening and closing like a man caught mid-lie. Rachel stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Listen to me. If you think you can scare us out of that house, you're wrong. You've ruined everything, and if you don't fix it, you'll regret it." "Regret?" I asked softly. "That sounds like a threat." "It is," she spat. "We'll go to court. We'll sue for harassment, emotional distress. We'll tell everyone what you did. You'll be the bitter old man who tormented his own family." I studied her for a long moment, the daughter I'd once held through fevers, tears, and scraped knees. Now standing here, spitting venom in the same breath she used to call me Dad. "You've already told everyone," I said finally. "You told me the villa was theirs. You told me I wasn't welcome. You told me Sarah would be ashamed. You've made your position clear." Her face twisted at my wife's name. "Don't you dare bring her into this." "She's already in it," I said. "She'd be horrified at what you've become." For a moment, silence blanketed the room. Rachel's lip trembled. Evan shifted uncomfortably. Then her mask snapped back into place. "If you don't hand over Crescent House, you'll never see your grandchildren," she hissed. "You'll die alone." The cruelty was deliberate, designed to cut deep, but instead of bleeding, I felt steel settle in my spine. "That's a choice you'll have to live with," I said evenly. "Not me," Evan finally spoke, his tone low and harsh. "We'll ruin you. We have friends, connections. We'll make sure no one trusts you. No one does business with you. You'll regret crossing us." "You've already crossed me," I said. "And you're discovering what happens when you do." Rachel's hands curled into fists. Her voice broke. "You think you've won? This isn't over. It's just starting." I opened the door and stepped aside. "Then I suppose we'll see who's better at finishing things." They stormed out, slamming the door behind them. Their taillights vanished into the night, leaving my house in silence once again. I returned to my study, poured a glass of water, and sat in the chair that had borne witness to so many battles. Business contracts, city council fights, courtroom testimony. This one felt no different. On my desk, Sarah's photograph smiled back at me. I touched the frame lightly. "You were always the patient one," I whispered. "But patience isn't what this needs anymore." By Wednesday morning, I had my next move. I called Victor Lynn and told him to meet me at Eli Sharp's office. It was time to make Crescent House untouchable, and to end this war on my terms. Wednesday morning carried the clarity of a sharpened blade. I drove into Gray Ridge's financial district, past glass towers and polished sidewalks that reflected the rising sun. For 3 decades, I had walked into rooms like these to negotiate contracts, close deals, and outmaneuver competitors who underestimated me. Today was no different. Only this time, the stakes were personal. Eli Sharp's conference room sat high on the 12th floor, all glass and chrome, with a view of the courthouse dome. Victor Lynn was already there, a stack of folders open in front of him. Eli, calm as ever, slid papers across the table with the smooth efficiency of a man who had notarized half the city's fortunes and failures. Rachel, Evan, and his parents arrived 5 minutes late. They entered like they owned the place. Rachel in a blazer too crisp for sincerity, Evan stiff with false confidence, Glenn and Marianne carrying the air of people about to collect on an inheritance they hadn't earned. Rachel took the seat directly across from me, her eyes narrowed. "All right, Dad, let's get this over with. We're here to finalize the villa transfer." I said nothing. I simply nodded at Eli. He cleared his throat. "Let's begin. Mr. Caldwell has already executed a transfer of Crescent House. As of Monday morning, the property belongs entirely to the Second Chance Foundation for Homeless Assistance. The transfer is irrevocable." The silence that followed was heavy, like a storm pressing down on the room. Rachel blinked. "What?" Eli repeated himself, his voice steady. "The villa has been donated to the foundation. The title has been signed, notarized, and filed. It is no longer in Mr. Caldwell's name, nor yours, nor anyone else's. It belongs to the charity, effective immediately." Evan's face went pale. "That's impossible. You can't just—" "I can," I said quietly. "It was mine to give, and I gave it to people who actually need it." Marianne's voice cracked. "What does that mean for us? Where will we live?" I met her eyes without flinching. "The same place you planned to send me when you took my house." "Somewhere else." Rachel slammed her hands on the table, the sound echoing through the conference room. "This is spite. Pure revenge." "No," I corrected. "This is justice." Victor slid another document forward. "The donation includes a lifetime usage clause for Mr. Caldwell. He retains full rights to access Crescent House as long as he lives. After his death, the property remains with the Foundation. Legally airtight? Evans slumped in his chair, the fight draining from his posture. So we get nothing? You get exactly what you earned, I said. Nothing. Rachel's face twisted. You've destroyed our future. You've ruined everything we built. You ruined it yourselves, I replied. The moment you tried to take what wasn't yours. For a moment the room was nothing but heavy breathing and the shuffle of papers. Marianne dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Glenn stared at the floor, his jaw tight. Evan looked like a man caught in a trap he never saw closing. Rachel stood slowly, her chair scraping against the polished tile. Her voice dropped to a whisper, raw with fury. I underestimated you. Yes, I said. You did. She leaned across the table, her eyes burning into mine. This isn't over. You'll regret crossing us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. No, Rachel. It's finished. Crescent House is beyond your reach. Every threat you made, every demand, every cruel word, all of it meant nothing the moment I signed those papers. She froze. I could see it land, the realization that she had been fighting a war that had ended before she even entered the room. Eli collected the documents with the calm finality of a man closing a chapter. That concludes this meeting. Rachel spun on her heel and stormed toward the door. Evan followed, his shoulders slumped, his fists clenched with impotent rage. Glenn and Marianne trailed behind, their faces hollow. The door closed softly behind them, leaving only the sound of traffic echoing faintly from below. Victor exhaled, leaning back in his chair. That was masterful. 30 years of construction contracts, I said. You learn to build more than buildings. You learn to build exits. Eli slid the notarized copies into a folder and handed them to me. It's done. They can't touch you now. I stood, collected the folder, and walked to the window. From this height, the courthouse dome gleamed in the morning light, unbothered by the petty wars of families. It was over, but as I stared down at the city, I realized something deeper. It wasn't just about Crescent House anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of myself I'd surrendered 3 years ago when Sarah died and Rachel discovered how easily I could be manipulated. Every check I wrote, every demand I accepted, every time I said yes when I should have said no, that man was gone. In his place stood the man Sarah had married, the one who built his life with sweat and steel, the one who refused to be broken by grief, entitlement, or betrayal. As I left the building, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I had one, but because I had remembered how. That evening I drove back to Crescent House. The sun dipped low over Crescent Lake, setting the water ablaze in gold. The house waited, silent, serene, unclaimed by anyone but me and the foundation that would one day carry it forward. I stepped inside, and for the first time since Sarah's passing, I felt peace. No shadows, no voices, no battles waiting at the door. Just home, and I knew, whatever came next, I would face it as myself again. Thursday morning rose crisp and clear over Crescent Lake, the kind of morning Sarah had always loved. Sunlight spilled across the water like molten glass, and the air carried that clean, pine-edged scent you could never bottle no matter how much companies tried. I stood on the terrace of Crescent House, with a mug of coffee in my hand, staring out over the stillness. The house was quiet. Not the charged, waiting quiet of last weekend, but the deep, settled quiet of a place finally freed of trespass. Noah's equipment had already been removed, packed into boxes, returned to his garage workshop where he'd no doubt start another experiment. The wires were gone, the projectors dismantled, the ghost grid shut down. Crescent House was itself again, unassuming, beautiful, secure. It belonged to the Foundation now, legally and permanently, but it still welcomed me. My key turned without resistance. My steps echoed through the rooms without protest. The house knew me, and I knew it. I sat at the kitchen table and unfolded the folder Eli had handed me after the meeting. Inside were the notarized documents, stamped, signed, filed. The final word. Rachel couldn't undo them. Evan couldn't intimidate them. Glenn and Marianne couldn't weep them away. The war was over. But victory wasn't the same as joy. I stared at Sarah's photograph, which I'd placed back on the mantel where it belonged. She laughed at me still, captured in that moment by the lake years ago, gray hair caught in sunlight, eyes alive with something that never dimmed. You always told me to be patient, I whispered. But patience doesn't mean surrender. The truth was harsh but clear. Rachel had crossed a line so deep it could never be repaired. For years I had mistaken my grief for weakness. Let it make me pliable. Let it teach her that love equaled obedience. Every time I gave in, every time I wrote a check or bent a rule or allowed disrespect, I trained her to believe I would never say no. She had been wrong. My phone buzzed just past 10. Her name lit the screen. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. I had nothing left to say and no obligation to hear her venom. She had burned the bridge, salted the earth, and then demanded a new one be built at my expense. There are some debts even a father does not owe. By noon, the calls stopped. By evening, silence. I walked the property slowly, retracing steps Sarah and I had taken 1,000 times, down to the dock, where we'd once tied up a little rowboat, along the tree line where she used to gather pine cones to decorate the house in winter, past the garden, long overgrown, where she had once planted wildflowers that bloomed in bursts of color against the stone wall. Everywhere I looked, she was still here, not in grief but in memory, not in shadows but in light, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel hollow walking those paths. I felt whole. That night I built a fire in the stone hearth, sat in the leather chair that had molded to my shape over the years, and listened to the wood crackle. The villa no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like what it was always meant to be. A refuge. Rachel's words echoed once in my mind. You'll die alone. But alone was not the same as empty. Alone was peace if chosen. Alone was strength if embraced. Some battles end with reconciliation, some with silence. This one ended with boundaries drawn so firmly they could never be crossed again, and that was enough. As I drifted off to sleep, I knew Crescent House would stand long after me, not as a monument to betrayal, but as a testament to resilience, a place for others in need after I was gone, a second chance, not just for me, but for strangers who would never know my name. And maybe that was the true legacy. Not the wealth I built, not the empire I managed, not even the house itself, but the lesson: kindness without strength is not kindness at all. Love without boundaries is not love. Rachel had taught me that by trying to take everything. Sarah had reminded me in memory to never let go of myself again. I finished my coffee as dawn broke over Crescent Lake, the waters alive with golden fire. The villa stood tall behind me, unshaken, unbroken. So did I. And for the first time since Sarah's death, I felt like I had not only survived, but returned. Crescent House was safe. My dignity was safe. And my heart, scarred but steady, was safe too. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would break on stone. If this story struck you, remember this: betrayal may wound, but justice rebuilds. Crescent House reminded me of that truth. Strength isn't about shouting. It isn't about force. It's about refusing to be erased from what you built with your own hands. So if you believe every betrayal deserves a reckoning, then like this video, share it with someone who understands the weight of family scars, and subscribe for more stories where justice finds its voice. And now I leave you with one question. Was Rachel punished enough? Or did she walk away too easily? Tell me in the comments below.